So, Josh, with the recent announcement about the PSN store closing on the PSP and PS3 and PS Vita, what are your thoughts?
Um, it's about time, isn't it?
I would say so. There has been a huge backlash to this announcement, primarily because the feeling is once the PSN store is gone, of course you won't be able to do, you won't be able to pay for or download games off the PSN store, like buy brand new games. The problem is say if a game is only released digitally on the PSN store and not a physical copy is available, then basically that game is no longer going to exist. You won't be able to play it again.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a few different things going on there, though, isn't there? It's like, I mean, the PlayStation 3 and that era have been around since
2006.
2006. So it's not surprising that Sony are deciding to shut things down. You know, hosting the store does cost them money, and whether or not they run it at a profit, you know, with the amount of sales that they make, you know, is I don't know if that's public information or if that's something only they know. I think the worst thing
Yeah.
that I see about it is actually how little notice they've given. I feel that is slightly don't want to say anti-consumer, but it's sort of, no one should be surprised that the store is closing. But I think I think it is okay for people to be upset that they've had 4 months notice, because it's like buying a phone from a manufacturer, and then they turn around and say, oh, we're no longer gonna like provide updates for that phone, and you're like, well, I just gave you 600 quid for this phone, like, do I not get anything more for that? So it's like, if you bought a game for 20 quid on the store 10 years ago, like, it doesn't hurt as much as if you bought that game at full digital price on the store yesterday. So I kind of get why. And if they said, oh, we're going to close the store in 2023, it's a bit easier to stomach it, isn't it? But when they've only given us till the end of August, or no, it's July, isn't it? July and August for the stores. I can totally see why that hurts. But I was surprised, and I didn't know that there were people still making games for the PS3 or something, and that seems a bit silly, like, in a way, like.
Well, these people that are still making games, they're indie. They're mostly indie developers.
But why aren't they making those games for the PS4?
Well, it could be because to get a license and to actually sell it on the PS4 but it is a good question, because if you can get it on the PS3, then why wouldn't you put it on the PS4?
Yeah, it's like if you're making parts for cars and you're making them for cars that came out in the 90s or whatever, and then you're upset that there's no market, and obviously the markets for different industries will dry up for different reasons, but like, I would be more. It would make more sense if they were upset that Sony were closing down the PS4 store, but they're closing down the PS3 store, which is now 2 generations old.
Yeah.
So it's a bit silly to. It's definitely upsetting that people can't buy, actual PS3 games that have been around for like 10 years or something. But developers trying to make a living on a platform that is quite clearly not actively maintained by Sony, like, that's a weird way. That's a weird way to sort of like try and make a living. Like, that's, yeah, it's like trying to sell coal to someone in the desert to heat their house. You're selling the wrong thing in the wrong market, really. Be trying to develop for the PS4 or develop on other platforms that you can develop on if you need licensing for the PS4. So obviously there are tons of these games on the PC, which I thought the PS3 was quite difficult to develop for. So I'm surprised that they're developing on the PS3 and not just for the PC.
Well, it's also the PS Vita, if you remember that, the handheld system.
And in some ways, I can kind of get why those two consoles kind of hanging around, because there is that whole nostalgia for it. But I mean, people aren't making games for the PS2 or the N64, are they? Like,
No.
why is this so much more egregious than those?
Well, I don't. For me personally, I don't really have a problem with it. The only problem I see that will come eventually, and which will be a problem for everybody, is at the moment, like, fair enough. If you buy the game off the PSN store, you've got till August to buy your games. Once you've bought your games, you're allowed to just, like, say if you delete the game off your PS3 or your PS Vita or your PSP, then you can still re-download the games. I can't see them having a server or keeping a server for just for that forever. Eventually, they'll be like, well, no one's really going to care about this, and that they would just take it away and say, well, you know, you had your chance to download these games. That's my biggest problem. And then eventually they're going to stop like game updates and stuff. So you might buy a game, put it in your PS3, and then it requires like a, I don't know, 5 gig update or something. But then because the servers are down now, you just got a broken game.
Well, I was going to say that won't matter so much because obviously if the game that you've got doesn't know there's an update, it's not going to stop you from playing games like they do now. Like if you try and launch Red Dead and it's connected to the internet and it knows there's an update, it won't let you play the game until you update it. If there's no update servers, then you won't get the updates to stop you from playing it. But I mean,
but you're just going to get a buggy mess though. You're going to get a buggy game compared to
that's you know, if you play N64 games, you know, they never got patches. Like the gaming industry moans about day one patches, and then they moan about not getting patches. So it's like pick your battles, mate. Like,
yeah, that's true.
there's
Like
plenty of games from the 90s and earlier that have bugs in them to this day because they weren't patched. Or you had to send your game in and receive the patched version. So, like, yeah, I get there's arguments every way. I think the worst, even more than what you're talking about with the updates, is games that require online activation and how that works. And hopefully most of the games already go straight to the developer, but then also you don't know if the developers are still, you know, if you've got a game from Activision, if it's not going to activate against Sony servers and it's not going to activate against Activision servers, then yeah, maybe you can't ever play those Activision games on your PS3. But I don't think that is a problem unique to downloads, is it?
Not at the moment. But eventually, because this is the first step, like, I can foresee them just keep going further. Like in a few years, they'll be like, well, they'll take this away, take that away. You don't need this.
At the end of the day, though, they are a business, and if they're saying, oh, it costs us, I'll just pick a figure out of the air, like it's costing us $100,000 to host these servers all around the world for PS3 and that era, sort of like downloads and activations, and they're like, well, we're getting nothing for it. You know, why are they going to throw away all that money every month, every year, just to keep a few hundred players around the world happy?
I think also a big complaint against Sony itself is the way they treat like the previous gaming systems, the backwards compatibility.
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier, and it's because the PS3 runs hand in hand with the 360, and I know Microsoft isn't perfect with backwards compatibility and not every game will run, but you know, I mean, I've spent a lot of time looking through the Xbox Game Pass library, and there's loads of games from the 360 that you can play on the Xbox One and presumably play on the Xbox Series. And it's, I think I said it in a previous podcast, like the way Microsoft have turned Xbox into a platform where you've got the 360 as the sort of like really old thing that only a few games can play on. But the fact that a lot of those games now run on, I don't know whether they port the games or if the code is for the 360 and the Xbox One is so similar that they can just play with a few sort of like tweaks and everything just to make sure they're not completely, you know, there's no weird issues between the two platforms. But the fact that that does seem so prevalent on Microsoft's side, and again, like the way that's like they've got universal play with games on Windows 10 as well. Like I don't know exactly how similar the code is. If they're so similar you could almost copy the game files from one to another and play it, or if it's like completely rewritten like games for the PS3 and Xbox 360 used to be, you know, like almost practically two different games. From my perspective as an Xbox person, the PS4 or the PlayStation world, it does seem so fragmented. Every console is like a standalone console, and nothing before it kind of, apart from the 1 and the 2, they were like clearly the same technology but the 3 and the 4 just sort of like practically threw all of that away. I think the PS5 must be able to play PS4 games because there's only about 3 PS5 games that have come out so far. So maybe they're starting to embrace it, but
Oh yeah, PS5 definitely it supports PS4 games, but the question is like, why don't you support PS1? Why don't you support PS2? You can understand why maybe like there's some limitations maybe on the PS3 because of the architecture that's involved with the PS3. But still,
I don't think so though, because you think about the power that is going into these consoles right now. And I know you look at PS3 emulators on the PC and how poorly they run, but I mean, actually, like Sony know the code. They don't have to make an emulator like us mere mortals, dude. Like they can make an emulator that can run a lot lower level than we ever can because they've got the original source code. They know the design of the PS1 well enough to, even if they have to put, imagine like if there was a PS5 nostalgia edition and it cost £100 more because it had a daughter board in it that had some kind of hardware acceleration to play PS1 and PS2 games, I think that would be a really popular product, don't you?
absolutely. Well, I don't see why like
Because people pay £100 for those the mini ones they bring out, like the PS Classic.
yeah, but that's the thing. So
So imagine if that hardware was actually in a PS5, and it costs £50, £100 more. I think people would buy it. Like people would buy that PlayStation.
all those boxes do is just they have a built-in emulator. They just use an emulator, so it's quite easy for them just to stick an emulator on the PS5. I think the reason why they won't do it is because they still make money from the PSN store by reselling you the game. It's like, oh, you got.
Oh yeah, but then they could do that, a bit like Nintendo does. Nintendo can emulate their NES games, and then they'll sell you those on the digital store. So Sony could do the same thing for the games that they've got the licenses for. They put the hardware into. I'm not saying it comes with every single game that the PS Mini came with, but if they put the hardware in there, then they could open up those games to resell again. Like, I think people would be open to that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting thought, but
It's an easy way to play those games. You don't have to worry about faffing about with, oh, do I have a RF connector for the telly? Do I have the SCART, the composite component, whatever? You're just like, oh, I can play practically anything on this console now. It's finally the Sony's answer to the Xbox One. The one console for everything. Games, classic games, media, and everything like that. If they could just find a way to throw a PlayStation Classic into a PS5, they could then win like the trust back that they're kind of throwing away.
I still think they're on top though, even if people are a bit disappointed about this announcement. I still think PS5 is a hot item in terms of trying to get our hands on it because it doesn't seem like anyone's be able to get a PS5 relatively soon.
Yeah, by the end of March, 6.29 million PS5s, Xbox Series X just over 4 million. I don't know what Sony Series X and PS5s, not including the Series S. So yeah, they seem to be selling more than Microsoft have. And actually, no, I don't think. I was going to say because obviously a lot of the games you can play on the Xbox One. Maybe a lot of people aren't switching over, like we haven't. But then we've not long had our Xbox One, so we're still 2 or 3 ways away from getting a new console. But if there's a lot more compatibility from PS4 to PS5, then people just aren't making the jump yet. I think it all comes down to. It's all going to come down to the games as they're coming out now, how compatible they are for the PS4, or if those are going to make people jump to the PS5.
I think having the fact, like for me, for the Xbox, like say if I got an Xbox 360 game and I got a physical copy, you stick it in your Xbox One Series X. It's like, oh yeah, you've got the physical game. I will download it from the cloud, and then I'll play it.
Yeah, I think that's what I've done. I think I've done that with the Xbox One and some 360 games. So I've put in Red Dead Redemption, the original one, because I wasn't sure if it was going to run or not, and I wanted to play it, and I could just be not lazy and plug the 360 in. It's literally it's sitting under the telly. It's just not plugged in to the HDMI switch. It's just sat there, but. I've gotten used to the Xbox One controllers, and the 360 controllers are hooked up to the PC in there, so it's just slightly easier for me to play it on the Xbox One. And yeah, it had to download the entire game practically, but it worked. I thought I might have to purchase the digital version, but actually it's quite happy to use the license on the disc and download the main version. And weirdly, I don't know if it's just me being a bit funny, but I think it looks better on the Xbox One than it did on the 360.
Definitely, it tries to do some upscaling.
What? Not on the Xbox One?
Yeah, I think so. It tries to.
Because I haven't got the One X. I've only got the One S. I've got the regular one basically.
Well, I definitely know that it basically the frame rate is a steady 30 frames per second. So on the Xbox 360, it was all over the place. It was 20 to 25 frames per second. Using putting it on the Xbox One, it at least gets a stable frame rate of 30. And I think if you buy an Xbox One X, not a Series X, but this is an Xbox One X, and you have a 4K TV, I think it even supports 4K 30.
Oh, so I'm looking at a post on Reddit from 4 years ago.
Yeah.
An Xbox One S, so previous gen console, will upscale all games to 4K, but it won't do native 4K.
That's good. What about the One X? Does it say anything about One X?
Ignore this. The S does upscale what Xbox One games, but will upscale all media to 4K. Okay. That being said, the source for that, they were citing a website that doesn't exist anymore. So I can't.
You know what's an interesting thought that I just had about the PSN store closing is, do you remember? So basically, with the PSP, you had so many versions of the PSP. You had PSP 1000, 2000, 3000.
Right.
And then eventually they came out with a PSP. I think it was Go.
So I'm not a Sony PlayStation guy. PS Vita and the PSP, what generations did they run alongside?
So PSP was around about the PS2 era.
PSP, so PSP is PlayStation 2, okay.
And then PS Vita was round about PS3, Xbox 360.
Okay.
But what I'm trying to say is the PSP, there was an old digital version of the PSP. I think it's called the PSP Go, and it came with 16 gigs of internal memory.
Oh, the one with the flippy out screen, yep.
So can you imagine trying to get all your games on that 16 gig? I'm not sure if you can add storage. I can't remember, but that must be hell.
Sony had their proprietary micro card or whatever it's called, memory stick.
Yeah.
So if they didn't have one of those on that, I would be shocked because they had it on every single one of their phones until 3 years ago.
That's why the PS Vita just didn't take off, because I think it was something stupid. There was some really good games coming out at the time, but then to get 16 gigs of space, memory storage, it was I don't know, it was 30 quid or something ridiculous, £30-40 for 16 gig. And when an SD card 32 gig was £5-10.
When was that? Sounds like modern prices. That doesn't sound like prices that would have been around 10 years ago.
It was around about 2013.
Yeah, that's not how much SD cards cost back then.
How much did SD cards cost back then?
Oh, I can look at my Amazon purchases and I can tell you how expensive they were 5 years ago.
I know the PS Vita memory cards were very expensive.
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. Sony micro memory sticks are more expensive than SD cards.
Yeah. And that's why the hacking scene has just taken off, because people are I really want to play these games, but I just don't want to download. I don't want to delete and then download the games. And people are I need to find a third-party solution, so to get my an SD card, because you could buy half the price of a Sony memory card, and you could get double, even triple the space using an SD card. And I think that's the biggest worry for people. Is like if you're stuck using Sony's memory cards as well. It's like, how are you going to fit all this stuff in? And if you're worried about them just closing down the option to, re-download the games, then you're pretty much screwed. So you've bought all this stuff, and then eventually it's all just going to go. You've spent all this money. But I'm not saying, of course that's not now, but maybe in the future, maybe like 5-10 years from now, they'll be like, oh, you know what? We don't really need to support this anymore. I think we can just take this server and use it somewhere else.
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna reuse actual hardware servers. They will be using something like Amazon Web Services, and they'll just shut it down. I don't think you need to worry about the Sony PlayStation 3 physical server sitting in a cupboard somewhere, because I don't think that exists. It's all virtual. But that's the other thing. It is virtual, and they can have it in such a way that the server capacity goes up and down with demand. So you just you can just have it sitting there for years. And if it costs Sony $100,000 a month, I can totally see why they might want to try and kill that. 'Cause, that's like 1.2 million a year. And I guess that still is nothing to Sony. But if they can cycle it down to some service that costs, the running costs of the store just for downloads and activation is just going to cost them just a few thousand, 10,000 a month or something. That could be stomachable by them for another decade or something.
But can you see, say 50 years from now?
Yes, absolutely. 50 years from now, you will not be able to download a PS3 or a PS Vita game, and you might struggle to actually launch them if you can't activate them against something. This might be this is possibly one of the first real instances of digital only media retiring, and this may help. It might help show what could happen in these situations, which may cause laws to be changed. If you buy a CD, you can play it for 100 years. If you buy an album off iTunes, you can play it until Apple no longer exists. Now, I've seen a lot recently as blue violet, ultraviolet. Do you know what that is? So if you buy a DVD, sometimes you get an ultraviolet code, and you can put it online, and you can download a digital version of that film to put in your iTunes library or your whatever you got. That they closed down, and they merged with another company. So I had an email saying, "Oh, don't worry, you can still watch your films with this company." And then literally 3 months later, that second company shut down. And I think I could still watch those films, but I didn't read the emails, and I didn't do what they told me I needed to do. So I probably can't anymore, but I'm really not bothered. People have paid value for something that they're no longer getting, and the same with all those PS3 games. You just got to hope that there's some there's some lawmaker's kid who can no longer play their PS3 game to make enough of a stink about it to do something about it.
Well,
and maybe this is where thinking about, oh, no one buys films anymore because everyone's paying for Netflix and Disney Plus and everything. If no one's buying games anymore because they're paying for Xbox Game Pass or the PlayStation, whatever they're going to call their version of it, maybe it's a problem that solves itself.
Yeah, could do. My advice would be to somebody out there that might be concerned about, I spent a lot of money on the PSN store, especially on the PS3 and PS Vita. PS Vita, I don't recommend buying Sony's memory cards. I would find another method of doing it, trying to find another storage medium. But for the PS3, I'm not sure what the limit is for the storage on the PS3. I think it might be like a terabyte, maybe 2. I know there is a storage, internal hard drive. So I would try and get the maximum storage and just try and download all your games and try update all your games so all your games are there, all your games are updated, so you don't have to worry about anything.
So there are online, you can buy SD card adapters.
Oh, for the PS Vita?
Yeah, because the SD card and the Sony memory stick are actually quite compatible in many ways. In fact, a lot of Sony products that take memory sticks will also accept a micro SD in the exact same slot. So I think electrically they must be quite similar. So what that does mean you can do is buy a micro SD card, download all your games from the PSN or whatever it is, but then you could use some kind of hardware cloning tool which does a bit by bit copy, not a dynamic copy, and that way you can make multiple copies. If you've got 2 or 3 SD cards, you can make multiple copies of those. So if one of them dies, memory cards aren't designed to last forever. I don't know how well you're going to go with copying it to a computer and back, but you could certainly do a kind of like a hardware copy, something like DD in Linux, which copies the bit as it is on the disk in the exact same place. As for, you can do the exact same thing for the hard drives that you put into a PS3, as long as the hard drive format is readable in Linux. You can download all the games you want, and then you can back up the physical drive to another drive by using something like Linux DD. And sure, there's probably programs that have got a GUI interface that will do the same thing for you. And let's not dance around it. If the services are going down, well, quote unquote piracy, that's going to be around, isn't it? Is it piracy if you can no longer buy it? It's technically abandonware. So if you can't buy the games anymore, you're still going to be able to download the game files in some way. You look at how people are making emulators and everything in the emulator way. Well, people will work out a way for you to download games and put them onto a memory card that will work on your PS Vita or your PS3 eventually, if that doesn't already exist. So I don't think you have to worry too much about getting hold of the games. The biggest worry would be, like I say, the activation of the games, and how if you've got an EA game, like, I don't know any EA games that from the PS3
Sims.
From the PS3 era. Sims 3, I think that runs on the PS3. Like, if Sims 3 requires internet connection to phone home, even with a disc, that's where you're going to fall down more than just not being able to download the actual game data. So I don't think the closing of the stores is the biggest sort of war story we're going to hear from video gaming. Is when publishers or whenever they either die or they turn off their activation servers.
The announcement of the PSP also getting discontinued, the PSN store, I was very surprised that it was still active. Like,
me too.
Who goes on the PSN on PSP? I would assume that would have shut down a few years ago.
Yeah, I mean, like we were saying earlier, there's all those developers that are making brand new games for this, for these consoles. And I do feel like there should be some kind of minimum term that a platform should give for termination outside of external factors. Like, if Apple ran out of money and said, okay, we're not making any more iPhones and we can't afford to run the App Store, so the App Store's going away tomorrow, like that I would understand. But Sony aren't in a situation where they can't afford to run the App Store, they just can't be bothered. There should be a grace period set in law, and I'm surprised the EU doesn't have something like that for the EU, because they are quite good in those sort of... The EU is quite consumer friendly. There should be something that says, if you allow developers to actively develop and release and sell new content, you have to give them 1 year, 2 years, 3 years notice that you're going to stop them from being able to release any new updates, with the exception of maybe some highly important security updates. But I don't know if you really need with operating systems. Sometimes you might see an update for Windows 7 despite it being discontinued, because the issue is so bad that Microsoft will fix it. I don't know if games really fall into that category of absolutely needed, so maybe not. But there should be a stepping stone. Like, in 3 years, you won't be able to submit any more games to the PlayStation 3 stores. In 5 years, you won't be able to sell anymore. And in 7 years' time, no one will be able to download the games. In 10 years' time, no one will be able to use any of our activation, and they'll have to go directly to you. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
the steps might be in the wrong order, but there should be something that says, here's the road plan for this store. You need to work out how your business is going to react to it. Like, as a business, only having 3 months, 4 months to react to quite devastating news is really bad. And this is actually, we're talking about, back in the summer, we were talking about Apple and how they've been anti-competitive with some of their app developers. And I think this kind of is sort of on the same sort of thing. Like, the platform owner, if they have this much control over an entire business's income, they shouldn't have that control. There should be laws in place to protect the small businesses from what seem to be instant decisions by these big companies. Or the platforms should have allowances that developer can still publish to the platform in other ways. So Android already has this with sideloading. Sideloading isn't great. There could be a better way to put an app on an Android device other than sideloading or the Google Play Store. But in other places where you can only install apps by the iOS App Store or the PS Store, if those are literally the only ways you can run your business, then the platforms can't have the control that they currently do. So it is sort of their fault for developing for a 16-year-old platform, but I also don't think it's fair that they've been given 3 months to try and turn around their games to run on newer platforms that are completely different to what they're working for the PS3 or the PSP or whatever. So I kind of feel both ways about that aspect of the news and the way that's kind of come out.
Yeah, I think you put it pretty well. I think, but who knows what Sony? Maybe Sony did talk to these developers, but like the reaction
They wouldn't have, though, because if they had, the developers would have spoken out. It's such a big issue that they would have spoken about it, and it's not like Sony would have spoken to them and say, here's an NDA, you can't talk about this publicly. It's not that important to Sony, and it is so important to these small-time indie developers. So I totally get why Sony want to turn the servers off. I think that's absolutely fine, and that's their right to do so. But they are effectively they could be making people effectively redundant, unemployed, because they're just not giving them enough time to turn their business around. And you can totally argue that they shouldn't be developing for old systems, but Sony should still give them a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. I don't think 3 months is enough. Businesses are slow to move. Development is incredibly slow. I mean, you work in development, it's not quick to react to things. So,
no,
it's how would, Tommy, you got 3 months and your company is giving up on Windows and all of your back-end servers has to run on Macs, and all of the clients are going to use Macs at their desks. Can you do that in 3 months? I don't think so. Like, not without
start again.
Exactly. And you can't afford to do that because you need to be making money in the meantime, which you won't be. So yeah, I think that's really bad on Sony's part that they've just given so little warning of what they're doing.
Yeah, I think it generally just and those games will probably be lost. But who knows? They might be able to port it to another system, like on the PC, Steam, or maybe on a Switch. Or there's a lot of indie games on Switch now.
You know what the next logical step is, right? Someone needs to work out how to manufacture PS3 disc games so you can distribute not by the internet but by the good old bricks and mortar or order online and they'll ship it from wherever they are straight to you over in 3 weeks' time.
Well, there are game companies, publishers, aren't they? I think limited run games. Have you heard of them? So they find that games or indie games that have little chance of actually making a dent in the market, and then you're saying to these games, "Oh, we'll release these games on a physical format."
Okay, so if the technology is there for, because what I know what happens is that the places that print CDs, and they're printed in a similar way to like record players. They're like, well, not printed, they're kind of like punched, because it's just foil inside the plastic. If someone buys those machines, or someone has bought those machines off of Sony, because that's what happened, before publishers had to give Sony 30% of their digital sales through the Sony store, they had to pay Sony to print their discs to then sell. So Sony's always had their 30% cut, or whatever the deal they like. I'm sure Sony and Rockstar had a better deal than smaller companies or whatever. If someone like Limited Gaming can get hold of some of those machines, even if they only do really small numbers of some of these games, it means that they can get out there. You look at a company like Massdrop, where they occasionally release they release a set amount of products once they've got enough buyers to pay for the manufacturing of it, and that might just be the way that it has to go. Like,
well, who knows? Like some of these indie developers, they could actually like start a Kickstarter campaign and say, look, we've run out of money. If you want this game, then try and support us, and we'll try and release it on a platform that you want.
And what about what about side loading? Like, jailbreak your PS3 so that it doesn't talk to the PlayStation Store, and it talks to the PS3 nostalgia store.
Well, we can't condone. We can't.
Why not? Because it's an abandoned hardware, and it's soon to be abandoned software. So, and I genuinely think this should be a legal right, that if a company abandons a platform and abandons the purchasing store, then it should be not criminally enforceable that if people jailbreak the consoles and use a community run distribution, they're not taking sales away from a company that is no longer taking sales. On what basis can Sony sue? They're like, oh, you're taking piracy, is killing our business. You're not selling those games anymore. So there should be no, I think there should be no legal criminality in doing that with old games and old consoles. Like, if Sony were going to be stubborn and say, oh, we're gonna host the PlayStation Store till 2050, and if you pirate a game, and we're going to come after you, I'd be like, okay, great. As long as I can buy the game from you, that's fine. But if I can't buy the game from you and I want to play it, well, the only way I can get it is through quote unquote piracy, and at that point, it's no longer piracy; it's archaeology. There you are.
The only thing I would say, though, if someone's listening to this and thinking, oh, that sounds like a good idea, I might or jailbreak my PS3. The only thing you got to consider is that if you're still playing your PS3 online, and there are still a few games that you can still play online, you've got to be very careful, because if you jailbreak your PS3 and then you go online with your PS3, then you could actually potentially brick your PS3. So that means you won't be able to use it. So if you do jailbreak your PS3 because you feel like, well, I can't buy any more games, or...
How do they get bricked?
Because to go on the PS3 online, you need to still sign...
But the PS3 online won't exist.
I think that will still be there. It's the PSN store that is going. It's not the actual PSN network. You still would need to sign in, and most of the Sony servers are gone. The only ones that are still there are like the Call of Duty, and no, Activision.
But they're not Sony servers. They're right. So don't get confused between publisher services and platform services. You know, you take a game like Age of Empires, and it's like, yeah, you can't play it on the MSN network anymore because Microsoft don't use that anymore. But you can still play point to point. If you're going to jailbreak your console, well, for the popular games out there, look at GTA 5, and you've got the whole 5M server community. You're not joining Rockstar servers. You're joining servers like hosted by the community, and it just runs off the same protocols and everything, and it kind of just runs. And it's like, you're not going to be able to play on all of these services forever. And you know, I don't think if you buy a PS3 or a PS Vita at this point that you should expect to be playing multiplayer games, because A, the services are going to be far and few between, and B, the players are going to be far and few between.
Yeah.
Like, how many people have PS3s, and how many people will be playing the multiplayer game that you want to play at the same time that you are playing it?
I gotta tell you, I have a PS3 Slim, and I stuck on Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and this was middle of the day, and of course, like you said, there are only a limited amount of players, but I still managed to get into a match and play online.
When was that?
Oh, this is a few months back.
Okay. In the middle of a global pandemic when no one's at work.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, it is true, but you know, it's probably not as much as I'm making it out to be. But
yeah, all I'm saying is, like, if you play there's only a limited amount of games that you can play online on the PS3, and if you still enjoy playing on your PS3 online, then I wouldn't recommend jailbreaking your console, because who knows who's going to be watching and you know, get banned. Maybe you'll just get banned and you just won't be able to go online, and then you'll be like, okay, fair enough. But I don't know. You could even break your console.
yeah, I mean, that's another whole thing to go into. I don't think that should be legal either. Like, you shouldn't be able to ban a player just because they've modded a console. Yeah, I get that. You might be able to ban them from playing a particular game, but that's not up to the platform, you know. That should be down to, like, you know, Rockstar will ban people for modding, you know, a GTA 5 session. Yeah, that's fine, but they shouldn't be banned from playing all games on the platform that they were currently on. They should still be able to go on play Destiny 2 on the same console. Like, I feel like that would be it's just so hostile, you know. Like, the way you'd get around that is to buy a whole new console and to get a new account, and oh well, then you've lost all the games you bought digitally and everything. Like,
yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. It's like, oh, you know, I've got these games, but then because I can't access the store anymore, I can't get any more. Let's try and jailbreak my console. But then there is a situation where you might, like, if you go online, or you know, you could get potentially banned, and then you won't be able to download any of your games that you've purchased. So then you're out of pocket. So that's the reality, unfortunately. What I recommend doing is buying another PS3.
I was just about to say, if you like your consoles and you like your old consoles, yeah, the best thing to do is to get multiple of them.
Yeah.
Unless it's the Xbox 360, because we all know they all die the same way. That being said, you know, my 2012 Xbox Slim, the glossy one with the hard drive, still holding on strong all these years later. It's not had as much use the last 2 years. Yeah, it's done pretty well, and it got a lot of use as well. Particularly the first 4 years, it was getting like between 4 and 8 hours a day.
I can beat that. I haven't got the arcade. I don't know. I've got like the 2006 Xbox 360. Where it didn't even come with a HDMI cable, HDMI port. It just comes with a component, and it still works. It has had the red ring of death, like I think like twice.
And you wrapped it in a towel?
No. Because Microsoft at the time they were supporting free repairs, right?
Okay.
So luckily I was like, oh yeah. So I haven't tested it in maybe like 2 years because I've got another Xbox 360 that supports HDMI at the back. But yeah, it would be fun to see if it still works. It's just I don't know where it is. Maybe in my loft somewhere. But it's nice to have a spare. But yeah, that's the oldest.
Just want to point out, when he says in his loft, it's not stored in his loft. He has a man cave in his loft that he can't access because that's the access is in his daughter's bedroom or something like that.
No. Well,
It's complicated. He can't get to his gaming rig, nor can he get to his Xbox because it's in the loft, inaccessible.
I went in there today, to be fair, and I've got so many consoles and God knows what plugs and stuff. So I bought like these stickers to stick on the plugs, and like write on the stickers and say what plug is what, because
that is a very good idea, as long as the stickers aren't gonna come off.
Well, I've put it on today, so I have to wait and see. But I've got so much. Like my plan is to move some of like the lead like. So like that Xbox 360 that supports component, I could just stick that in the shed, because it's not like it's not that valuable. Like if someone were to steal it or break in my shed up.
Do you want to explain what the shed means?
Oh, it's just a garden shed. It's just a brick wall.
It's not a shed, it's a garage.
Well, yeah, I call it a shed.
I don't know why you call it a shed.
Potentially, you can get my car in it.
It's got a garage door and it's got another external door. It's a garage, but you're essentially turning it into a man cave that you can access without upsetting the entire family.
Yes, that's correct.
It is, however, 20 meters down, at the end of a garden. So you've got power, but you don't have network.
Well, I can, to be honest, like, I'm not, see, that's the thing. If I put an old Xbox 360 in there, if I put a PS2 in there, if I put my original Xbox, if I put my Wii, I think the Wii is the only one I could actually maybe still play online.
I know you got power up there, but I don't think you've got plumbing. You should go inside.
What do you mean? What, can you see it now?
If you need to go to the toilet, go inside.
Nintendo Wii.
All right then.
That's all right, man. I've got two of them now. I really think the Nintendo Wii is an unrated system.
Underrated. Okay.
Yes.
I don't think it's underrated at all. It's a fantastic console and everyone knows it.
Most people hate it because of the Wii controls. They're like,
Wait, the Wii or the Wii U?
No, the Wii. I haven't got a Wii U. I would like a Wii U.
The original Wii, I don't think it's underrated at all. I think it was a really successful console. So many people that I know had a Wii that hadn't necessarily had any other console before. And it was because it had those controllers that you were just saying people didn't like. And they worked so well. Like, my parents can use a Nintendo Wii and they can't use a computer.
Yes, but what are you? Are you a casual gamer or a hardcore gamer?
It's got nothing to do with what I am.
Yeah, of course it is, because most people that actually enjoy video games, instead of people that are just like, oh, look,
I wasn't talking about me. I was talking about me seeing so many people with a Nintendo Wii.
But what I'm saying is that most hardcore or just like have an interest in gaming despise the Wii because of its Wii controls. The Wii remote. It's like I want a controller. Yeah, absolutely.
Really? I've never seen this.
Oh yeah, there's so many people online that are just like, oh, they see that there's a Wii version and like, is there any other version like a PS2 or an Xbox or an Xbox 360, because they just can't get along with the Wii controls. It's like
like the Wii controls are gimmicky, yeah, and they're not suited for every game, sure. But with the right game, it's a really good console.
Yeah, it is when the developers actually take some time to utilize the actual Wii remote in the game. But most, like, say if a game is made for the PS2, Xbox, and the Wii version, it's gonna be like less playable in terms of enjoyment for controls, because they're not going to spend so much time if it was just a Wii exclusive like Zelda, where they make sure that the Wii controls are really good. But yeah, I'm the thing I like about the Wii in terms, like, it supports 480p. Some games are on there that are on the PS2 and Xbox, and they are like, the Wii is like the superior version. Like, it's very close to the Xbox original in terms of graphical power, the actual power inside. And there are some interesting games. I would like to play a little bit more around with the Wii, because a lot of people just hate it because of its Wii controls, the Wii remote. They can't stand having the physical buttons and, traditional like PS3 controller, PS4 controller, Xbox controller. They can't get used to, like, especially like FPS, first person shooters. Like, you're standing there and you're waving it around, and people just can't get used to that. I think the only game that actually got that right was probably like Metro. I think they had like Wii controls, and I remember playing Resident Evil 4 on the Wii, and that the Wii remote and the motion sensors was pretty good on there, but the actual graphics itself were not very good compared to like what we got now is the PC version.
It's quite interesting what you're saying about the controls, because in some ways the Wii as a console is quite similar to VR gaming as a concept. It was radically different to what came before it and what was around it. And yes, some people may have had quite polarizing opinions of it when they used it. Maybe they used it once and gave up with it. Maybe they used it quite a lot and just couldn't get over the way the controls were. And I think VR is the same way, and they're having to hit the same. They're hitting some of the same problems. So I remember you could buy all these adapters for the Wii controllers, and you can put them in a tennis racket. You can put them in a machine gun thing, and for your like James Bond games and everything. And I think like we're kind of going through that with VR again at the moment. Like, there are aspects of VR that make people feel funny. Like, how do you move in VR? Do you have them run on the spot? Do they use the controller to move, but that makes them motion sick? Or do they point and click and they kind of warp to the place, but that doesn't feel very realistic, and everyone loves realistic games, and it's almost like similar problems are kind of coming around when you can put your Wii controller into one of these specialized devices to make it more useful as that device in game, but then it made it slightly more harder to use it as a slightly more traditional controller. So it's interesting how the Wii was so far ahead of its time for coming up with problems of how to control a character in a game, and we're having the same issues in a slightly different way 10 years later. And it's actually interesting because VR doesn't seem to be solving these problems. Like, VR's been around for quite a while now, and it's still being spoken of as if VR is yet to come, despite it being around since something like 2013. The second gen DKs were around or something.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the new PlayStation VR, the VR2.
Yeah, this is what I've sort of been waiting for. Like, I did use the PS4 VR briefly before the pandemic happened, hence why I haven't used it since. I'm looking at that USB slot on the front of the PS5, and I'm like, that's got to be there for the PSVR link, headset link, if they're not going wireless with it. Because the PS4 VR was good enough for the average gamer. The games were fun that we tried.
Did you try Resident Evil 7?
No, mostly because it was our vicar's PS4.
Fair enough.
Yeah, our vicar has a better gaming console than us. That's quite funny. That being said, the game that I played was the demo on the demo disc, and it's the London bank heist sort of thing, and
Oh yeah.
there's a lot of swearing in that game, and shooting people point blank, and and there's your vicar just laughing his head off 2 feet, the next sofa over as I'm not doing very well and nearly got the gun shot out of my hand.
Well, I remember my first experience. Oh no, I think you took me. It was at uni, wasn't it? It was some sort of.
You tried it so you did a level of a game created by a student.
Yeah.
But that was, I did that as well before you did it. If you could picture in your head the one of the really early Microsoft screensavers where it kind of just goes down all of those the corridors, but imagine that in the horror genre, and that's what this student had come up with, and basically they just filled it with a jump scare.
It was really good.
It was amazing.
It wasn't very good. I told him it was amazing, but
But what was your first VR aside from that? Because that was just a tech demo.
Okay, yeah.
What was your first actual VR experience?
Resident Evil 7 on VR.
When was that?
Oh, that was like the thing is, I kind of ruined it for myself because I saw a lot of videos of Resident Evil 7 being played in VR, and
Yeah, but hang on, when was it? Like what? 2 years ago? 7 years ago? Like what?
2 years ago. I'd say 2-3 years ago.
Oh, right, and where was it?
It was in my house.
Right. Okay. Carry on.
So pretty much, I played the game all the way through, and not using VR because I didn't have VR at the time. But then I was like, man, I'm really excited to play this game in VR. It was very good, but because I really played the game already, I know what's gonna happen, if you know what I mean. But there is a scene where you're in the game, your girlfriend, you start like talking to her, and then out of nowhere she just starts like reacting a little bit silly. You're like, what's going on? And then she pulls out a knife, and she starts like going, proper trying to get you with the knife. And I gotta say, that was the most frightening experience. I was like, please don't hurt me. It's just crazy, some crazy lady. The thing is, I really need to get back into it. Because I've played it before, and like I know what happens. And to be honest, playing in VR, like I just can't play for very long. I get massive headaches, like severe headaches. I can only play like half an hour. And this is just me just standing or sitting down, like playing with the controller. I've got the PlayStation Move controller things. I haven't even opened them yet. The little fake Wii remotes.
Yeah, the light bulbs.
The light bulbs.
How much do you want for them?
No, I'm not getting rid of them. They're mine. But
I'm supposed to be buying my brother-in-law's PS4 whenever he gets a PS5. But
right.
He has the original PS4, so if I want, which I think it does do PS4 VR, but you need that little hardware box or something with it.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. How much is he selling it for?
Oh, I don't know. And that won't even come with the VR either, so I'd have to get that separately. I should probably buy one. I don't want to buy a used one. Can you still buy those new?
No, I don't think so.
You must be able to, because you can't buy.
Well, maybe then. It might be like in a store somewhere and they have a bundle or something. But the thing is, like, you're still going to be paying maybe a lot of money for something that's going to be very much outdated in like years time, because so you might as well like wait. But then, like you said, you're less likely to get that version brand new.
Yeah, no, just actually, can't get it. Doesn't look like they're selling it. Game aren't selling it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just want to put someone else's face up against my face.
Right. Final thoughts on the PSN store. Josh?
I don't think it's surprising. I just think it's sad that they've done it so quick. Like, they really should have given a longer time period than they have done. Just to give those developers a bit more time to pivot and move their business model to something that is sustainable. But Sony got to do what they got to do. They are a business themselves. It might even be this might be something that's sort of like coming from the board. Their stakeholders and everything. They might not that they don't have a choice, but they might be being pressured to give this up because it's obviously so old, and maybe it's costing them more than they feel it's worth to them. So it shouldn't be seen as surprising, but it is a shame, particularly if anyone has bought a literal brand new game in the last year or two, or if people, someone is still actively developing for it.
I think my biggest issue is the fact that the store is shutting down in terms of for like PS3. So you can't buy any new PS3 games, but if you do buy your PS3 games before it closes, then my problem is that why can't you, if you bought the game on the PS3 store on PSN, why can't you play that on your PS4? Why can't you play that on your PS5, especially your PS5? Like Microsoft, like you gotta give them credit. It's like it's not every game. Of course, it's not every game, but if you buy a game off, well, if you have a physical game and it's supported, they'd let you play it. Or if you bought something off the Xbox 360, even the Xbox original back in the day, Xbox Live, if you bought something off that 10, 15 years ago and you still have the same account, it will still recognize that, yeah, you own this game. And that's my biggest problem, where Sony are just like, well, and I think that's with Nintendo as well. Nintendo are even worse, I think. But with Sony, it's like there's no excuse.
Yeah, there was that meme going around about them game 20 years ago, $50, and now they're selling the same game, not even updated, just literally the same game, $60.
Yeah, but well, to be honest, like if they can move those PS3 games and put them onto the PSN store on the PS4 and PS5, then, or even like just recognize the fact that that person's bought the game and then try and say, yeah, we're trying to add these titles that technically you can no longer buy it in the PS3. We're gonna try and move them onto the PS4 or PS5, but what they will say is, what you can do is access our streaming service and pay a subscription to access, and then you can play some of your PS3 games on there. That's what they'll say.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't think we're going to see that, but that's just going to be a shame, isn't it? If the whole emulation story is just so difficult to do, then I think we just might be saying goodbye to some of these games.
Well, like you said, like if a group of guys can make an emulator on the PC, then Sony have the blueprints to do it. I know like PS3 emulation is hard with the architecture, but if a group of guys can do it, and then of course you need a pretty powerful PC to to run these games, but they're still running and they're still getting in game. Where Sony has the actual blueprints behind the PS3, they should know how to make an emulator.
I think the important thing to remember and to maybe do is you got shops like CEX and I don't know what companies in America, maybe GameStop. The companies that specialize in pre-owned games, and obviously if people aren't buying physical copies for the Xbox One and the PS4, you're not going to see very, very many of those in those shops, and even less of the Xbox One, the Xbox Series and the PS5. And by the time the PS6 comes around, it might be fully digital. And I feel like these types of stores are going to be solely reliant on PlayStation 3 and earlier physical sales. And I think PS3 is still of the era where the majority of games, the disc version, the activation is on the disc and it doesn't phone home to make sure you can still play it. So you might just have to give up on your digital version and go fully disc on the PS3 and all of that. And to be honest, like, the price of a lot of these games do seem to be dropping. You know, you look at some games and it's like every 6 months there's another 50p off the price. That you just might just have to suck it up and accept the losses on the digital sales and just pick them up secondhand in some form or another.
There should be a perfect example of why you should not pick up a PS5 digital version.
No, I don't think so, because if you have to connect to the internet to play the game, that means that there is some kind of activation server. Even if you only have to do it once a month, it means the disc isn't the activation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you have to connect every single time you want to play Red Dead, or if you have to connect once a month to play Red Dead, that means that that game is dependent on a server somewhere else in the world. So having the disc version or having the digital version won't make the blindest bit of difference as to whether you can play that game in 50 years' time. Whereas with a PS3 game, I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I believe that's of an era where if you have the disc version, you will always be able to play it until that disc stops working or your disc drive stops working. But I don't think that's true of PS4 and newer. I just knowing how companies like EA and
Ubisoft
and even Rockstar, like they've got on the PC, they've got the Rockstar launchers. Like, you can't launch the game without connecting to Rockstar services. So, like, if you have the disc version of Red Dead Redemption 2 and Rockstar stops existing in 5 years' time, you might never be able to play the game again because your 30-day license check expires, and you can never, unless they patch the game to stop that checking in service. I just don't see that being a thing that will happen forever. I think that ship has sailed on complete 100% completely offline activation.
Well, that will conclude our podcast for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and listen to the next video, please.
And if you're a regular person who listens to podcasts in a podcast app, don't forget to hit us up on your podcast of choice. We do seem to be on most of them.